Well, for more, we can cross to our correspondent, Benedicte Pavior in London. Benedicte, tell us more about what we heard from Olly Robbins in that testimony.
Well, it was a long session. It was 2.5 hours, which we all watched attentively. And this former top civil servant at the Foreign Office, of course, no longer, therefore, in the employ of the government, but who is highly respected and has really a lot of experience under his belt, said repeatedly that he was keen not to apportion blame, and he certainly didn't want to give names, although I will allude to one in a moment that he did give and is causing some significant concern here. So let's just pick up on that dismissive approach that we just heard in that clip to the vetting. This is something that came up repeatedly. Basically, Sir Olly Robbins said that when he took up his post at the Foreign Office on the 20th of January, Lord Mandelson's appointment had already been announced and indeed agreed by the United States. He added that Lord Mandelson had already been given access to the Foreign Office building, certainly, and also, which is also concerning, to highly classified briefing on a case-by-case basis. So de facto, he was already clearly, the Lord Mandelson was doing the job. What Sir Olly Robbins then added is that these factors resulted in this dismissive approach to what is called developed vetting, so further security checks of a very personal nature often, and from Downing Street, and really that there was that pressure, that constant pressure also, he added, political pressure to rush this through. As we were just hearing, there was that strong expectation, he said, from Downing Street that Lord Mandelson needed to be in post and in America as quickly as humanly possible. And this was with emails, with phone calls, almost on a daily basis. And then he added this sentence: there was never any interest, as far as I can recall, in a whether, but only an interest in a when, therefore, the security clearance would be given. What is also interesting is that in a letter to the committee, Robbins said that the body that conducts vetting considered Mandelson, quote, a borderline case, and was also, quote, leaning towards recommending that clearance be denied. And he added that this was not related to Jeffrey Epstein, the convicted sex offender. So the question beckons is, what does it refer to? But clearly, political masters, Downing Street, putting pressure on the Foreign Office that, as we know, in the end, and indeed Sir Olly Robbins, who is satisfied with his decision, gave that clearance to Lord Mandelson to occupy what is the highest post in British diplomacy, that of UK ambassador to Washington.
All right, so Benedicte, where does this leave Keir Starmer?
Well, it leaves him more damaged, more weakened, basically, and certainly Kemi Badenoch, who called late last night for an emergency debate that has just got underway in the House of Commons. She, during this testimony, these 2.5 hours this morning, actually tweeted, and her basic conclusion is that the evidence this morning was devastating, that it shows the not at all a respect from Downing Street for what is constantly referred to by Sir Olly Robbins as national security. And also, Sir Olly Robbins had made clear also in his evidence that this is really putting this all on display for the public. And particularly his concern was about the enemies of the United Kingdom, which is not a good thing. But Kemi Badenoch, who will be on her feet shortly, basically said about this morning's evidence from Sir Olly that it was devastating, and she reiterated that Starmer misled Parliament. In other words, in plain language, lied to Parliament, something that the Prime Minister was at pains repeatedly yesterday when indeed asked by either his fellow MPs in the Labour Party, governing Labour Party, or in the opposition, that he absolutely denies having misled Parliament. Of course, misleading Parliament is a very serious offence. One is supposed to correct the record as soon as possible, which, given that that Keir Starmer actually got that evidence and revelation about what had gone on last Tuesday, and the fact that he only came to Parliament on Monday, that is also heavily criticised. But Sir Keir, very clear yesterday, again and again, during the over 2.5 hours that he was at the dispatch box, that he doesn't believe, he recognises it was wrong to appoint Lord Mandelson, but he clearly says that he was right to sack Sir Olly Robbins, and basically he's absolutely, despite all the calls from Keir Starmer, the leader of the Conservatives, also the leader, Sir Ed Davey, of the Liberal Democrats, the leaders of other opposition parties, for Keir Starmer to stand down, to resign. He is basically going nowhere. Let's remember we've got local elections coming up in 2.5 weeks, local elections that will probably damage the Labour Party more, and therefore MPs on the Labour side don't seem keen at all to start a leadership contest. And anyway, there's no obvious successor to Keir Starmer. So we'll have to see. Possibly this will play out after those local elections, or possibly even longer. A slow death, possibly by 1,000 cuts for the British Prime Minister.
Well, as you say, Benedict, it's a story that we haven't seen the end of. Thank you very much for that.